we're double paying.
That's actually a great point. The fact that we're double paying for the capacity that we're forcing off the grid, we're paying to replace them with these projects that Ethan laid out in the report that we'll drop in the show notes. And then because of the shortfall, we're going to have to pay to go out into the spot market and try to pay for power at a premium, hoping that someone has some excess that they're willing to sell us, which is, can't always count on that. As we see with the request to delay Comanche 2, they were afraid of relying on the market to make up that gap and say, we better keep the coal plant on. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to another episode of PowerGab, your go-to show for all things energy and environmental policy here in the state of Colorado. I'm Jake Fogleman, joined as always by my co-host Amy Cooke. And for this week's episode, we have some pretty big news, huge topic of discussion actually in the energy world, and that is, of course, the fact that Xcel Energy actually just recently went to the Public Utilities Commission and submitted a petition to essentially delay the retirement of Comanche Unit 2, which is one of the coal plants down in Pueblo that we've talked about so frequently on the show, what it means to that community and what it means to the reliability of the electric grid. It was originally supposed to be shuttered at the end of this year as of New Year's Eve, and Xcel came and said, for the sake of system reliability, we need to keep that on for at least another year. And the real money quote in the petition, I'll read it off before I kick this over to you, Amy, but I think it captures just what they're talking about in terms of options and why this is necessary. And the petition says, the joint petitioners believe that the continued operation of Comanche Unit 2 in 2026 is the most cost-effective approach to providing needed electricity for the system. So I think that pretty much says it all. It kind of, funny enough, matches what we may have been saying about this for a while now, but it's good to see in a utility filing.
Yeah, we've been saying this for a long time, and who knew that almost already paid for units providing reliable power that would be cheaper and more cost effective to keep the lights on than a premature retirement and the shuttering of, shutting it down versus trying to procure or build new replacement. We've said this a million times. It's like saying you're perfectly good Toyota Camry, which has maybe 100,000 miles on it, but it's still got a lot of useful life on it. You occasionally have to change the oil on it. You've got to get new tires. It needs a tune-up, whatever. That actually is more cost-effective to keep that than it is to purchase your brand new, DeLorean if they made it, which is a boutique vehicle at best. It's temperamental, it's incremental, or it's intermittent. Sometimes the doors open, sometimes they don't. Sometimes it'll go, sometimes it won't. But it's the equivalent of that, and we've known it. We've done repeated studies on this, and so I'm not surprised, but I was pleased to see all of those who really have gotten a dose of energy realism, because it isn't just Xcel asking for this, it's the PUC staff. It's the Colorado Energy Office, Will Tour's office. It is the Utility Consumer Advocate that is asking for it as well. So these are state agencies, along with Xcel, that are finally, they see what we see and what we've laughed at Eric Blank sees, who is the PUC chair. Once you see it, you can't unsee it. And that is, we're not going to be able to keep the lights on, and costs are skyrocketing and are going to continue to do so. And so the most cost-effective way to keep the lights on, at least for the next year, according to these four entities, is keeping Comanche 2 open and online. And part of that is because Comanche 3 is down. You cannot shut down. Xcel can't afford to lose 1.2 gigawatts of power. They just can't. I mean, like when I say get a generator, it'd be like, get it now. I mean, if all of this were to happen. But there are a couple of other things that I just want to bring up on this. One is that just about Comanche. I went back to the 2004 settlement that was on Comanche 1, 2, and 3, and we're going to drop the link to it in the show notes. In 2017, I popped that up on ScribD thinking, I bet at some point we're going to want that. Obviously, clearly, at least I did. But I went back and read it. And you know what's interesting on this, Jake? Everybody went back on their word. Everybody went back on the word. The commission went back on its word. The Xcel went back on its word. The environmentalists, all of these environmental groups went back on their words as well. And so looking at that original settlement, people would have thought that it was going to be done. And Comanche, and the settlement was to be able to open Comanche 3. So that settlement meant that Xcel was going to invest millions in putting the latest and greatest environmental technology on 1 and 2. And then they would also, 3 would be the cleanest burning coal-fired power plant in the country. And that was all part of the settlement. There's also $196 million in there for demand-side management. And it was the first time that there was a carbon tax that was considered with the settlement for Comanche 1, 2, and 3. And so when I go back and look at that, and we said it in 2017 that when we were intervened on the next, on another round against Comanche 1, 2, and 3, when we did it as the coalition of ratepayers, said it's not in the public interest to close Comanche 2 and 3 prematurely. It's going to cost ratepayers just a small fortune. And so I will say this. They knew it in 2004. Greg Sopkin, who was the chair of the Colorado Public Utilities Commission, he knew in 2004. And is it okay if I just read part of what he said? And then we actually have we have a really interesting guest that I want to get to. But this is Greg Sopkin concurring in part on this settlement. This is in 2004. So they knew it in 2004. They knew it in subsequent settlement agreements. And we knew it when we intervened in 2017. This was not in the public interest because, and this is the number one reason. Well, I wouldn't say the number one, but it's one of the single most important reasons. It's cost. It was cost because the people that usually sit at that table are sitting around with the settlement agreement, and ratepayers aren't represented. I mean, there was the Utilities Consumer Advocate which was the office of the Utilities Board. I can't even remember what it was then. It's changed names several times. But it's easy to talk about putting millions of dollars on ratepayers when the ratepayers aren't sitting there. So this is what Greg Sopkin said, and I love this. He actually starts off with a Thomas Sowell quote. He said, "Why anyone would expect better decisions to be made by third parties, those who are settling, who pay no price for being wrong, is one of the mysteries of our time." And that was Thomas Sowell. And he was 100% right. The settlement agreement, this is what he writes, the settlement agreement sanctioned by many parties to this case resembles an omnibus budget bill. That is, it doles out pork to many special interests without sufficient regard for the party left unrepresented in the transaction, the ratepayer. In my view, our primary duty as an economic agency is to protect the ratepayer from overreaching by parties who put their own interests above all else. It is our economic expertise that enables us to make sound decision on economic matters. And when we let matters foreign to our expertise, speculative future environmental taxes and credits, and outside of our control, because of course they were threatening to sue, the threat of litigation, outweigh the interests of those who will be paying the resulting higher rates for the next few decades, we exceed the legislative delegation entrusted to the commission, and our decision is entitled to little credibility. And he goes on to say, we are an economic agency, and he absolutely blasts the commission's decision to settle this. It was a 2-1 in part, and it was based on the first ever carbon tax, essentially, that was in violation of Tabor, I might add, that was included in this settlement of Comanche 1, 2, and 3. And I dare say that Greg Sopkin was 100% right. But with that, I do want to, and one other thing, and then we should introduce our guest. I'm sorry, I could go on about this forever, and I'll try not to, but we're thrilled. Listen, we're thrilled that this is happening, that Comanche 2, they're recognizing this, and Comanche 2 has possibly another year, has gotten a stay of execution, let's put it that way. And I'm so glad they've gotten this dose of realism. But there were people who knew what was going on was wrong, and they said it out loud, and they were ignored. So anyway, one of the settling agencies, one of the settling parties was Western Resource Advocates, of which Eric Blank is he was the executive director for a while. And I want to get this quote because, by the way, as you might have guessed, and it's no surprise that all of the environmental NGOs, Earth Justice, Vote Solar, Green Latinos, well, I wouldn't exactly call the NAACP an environmental group, but they came out opposed. Western Resource Advocates, Erin Overturf, weighed in, and this is what she said. If we are in a so-called energy emergency, then why is the administration bending over backwards to slow the procurement, actually, of clean energy resources like wind, solar, and batteries? That's Erin Overturf. But I think we have a response to that.
That's right.
With that, because I've taken way too long, but again, I could talk about this forever. But I think with that, we should introduce our intern, Ethan, who in perfect timing has a paper we're about to drop about that really gets to the heart of this reliability crisis that Erin Overturf doesn't think exists.
Yeah, that these environmental groups claim doesn't exist.
Yeah, doesn't exist.
So first of all, Ethan, welcome to PowerGab. Before we dive into your paper, why don't you tell the listeners just a little bit about yourself and how you came to be an intern here?
Yeah, thanks, Jake and Amy. And thanks for having me on the podcast. So a little bit about me. I'm a master's student at Colorado School of Mines, studying natural resource and energy policy. I'm really interested in the regulatory space as a whole. Did a little undergraduate research looking at critical minerals and have now kind of pivoted into more energy-focused resource research. This most recent project was really interesting, looking at Colorado's plan to close all these coal-fired power plants and their planned generation replacements. You're right. It is extremely timely in terms of looking at the critical gap that I found in my research and the state's transition plan as a whole.
Yeah. So to that end, why don't you tell just a couple of the numbers? What are we looking at in terms of losing capacity, and what looks like at least is on the way to replace that or try to replace that capacity?
Yeah. So I guess when looking at my report, the main difference that I kind of boiled it down to was nameplate capacity and accredited capacity. Nameplate is best case scenario approach, kind of like that marketing number that a lot of renewables like to stamp. And I guess accredited capacity is kind of the reality of the situation. It's the power that you can actually count on during peak demand when it's cold and in the summer or when it's cold in the winter and the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. And essentially, my analysis found that we are retiring thousands of megawatts of high accredited coal and replacing them with intermittent sources that have a tiny fraction of accredited capacity. So it's not like a swap for swap. It may look like that when looking at nameplates, but yeah, so the grid is required to have a safety buffer or a reserve margin of about 6.4%. Um, and according to Excel's adequacy forecast, by 2030, as these coal plants go offline, my analysis showed that we will plummet into negative 17.6%.
What does that mean? We'll plummet into the so essentially, if I'm understanding that correctly, we won't have enough power to meet demand.
Yeah, so yeah, to make it real, it's a physical shortfall of about 2,100 megawatts. Yeah, that's basically the number that I came up with.
So it's basically like the entire, you know, Comanche station, all units worth of power that suddenly doesn't exist on the grid, or we're that far short off of what we need to adequately meet demand. A little bit frightening, to say the least. What types of resources, you know, because you mentioned in here there are some resources that are planned to come online as these coal plant closures are slated to occur. What in your research looks like it's going to be coming online to try to, you know, buffer that gap?
Yeah, so I looked into the EIA's website and looking at the planned generation plants on behalf of Xcel and some other utilities that have associated coal plant closures with them. Um, for Xcel, there is one solar pro or two solar projects around, I think, 600 megawatts, and then a battery project worth of about 200 megawatts, and then wind of about 600 megawatts. And then Pawnee Station, of course, being converted to natural gas, which is about a 500 megawatts.
So when I hear that, Ethan, I think, well, it's plenty of power. I mean, you know, they're only running Comanche 3 at half power anyway, and Comanche 2 is 350 megawatts. It seems like we have plenty of power. I mean, Aaron Overturf even says that, I mean, the biggest problem is we're not putting enough wind and solar online, but it even sounds like we have enough. What's the difference?
Yeah, I think it really is that that equation of accredited capacity and looking at numbers dedicated to effective load carrying capacity that really kind of reveals the reality of the situation that a lot of these renewables do not have the same accredited reliability through tough times when when the sun's not shining and the wind's not blowing. So it prevents or it shows a lot of issues in that kind of system.
And to jump on that point here, these accredited capacity numbers, this isn't just like you doing back of the napkin math or Amy and I at the Independence Institute trying to, you know, put our values on this. You, if I'm not mistaken, pulled this directly from what Xcel has been reporting to the PUC to get these capacity values, right? This is what they're saying that these resources bring to the system, if I'm not mistaken.
Right. Yeah. This is the adequacy report that Simel Excel has submitted themselves. And yeah, and it is extremely reflective of the times that we're living in, at least this past week, kind of showing, hey, like we do need these reliable power plants online.
So, what are some of the? Let's go through some of the accredited capacities. What is an average accredited capacity for wind or solar? What does that look like, and compare it to, yeah, I don't know, natural gas or, gosh, I just wish we had nuclear. But um, what do those look like?
Yeah, so well, I guess you can compare it to the planning reserve margin that Excel wants in their future plans, which is obviously 6%. So they want 6,900 megawatts accredited capacity by 2026. And yeah, looking at that, it's just that number's just going to go down. Demand's going to rise, and yeah, it's a serious issue. But yeah, by 2030, I think the projected total credited capacity is 7,520, but the projected shortfall is about 2,000. So yeah, it shows some major issues.
And I think you crunched some numbers on different accredited capacity numbers just
I
for
did.
a couple, just to make the point.
Because that's what I do at night. Everybody else is probably watching some cool series on Netflix, or I know my husband is. But so I'm sitting there. I decided I was going to look at two facilities that Xcel Energy owns. One is Comanche 3, which cost about $1 billion, maybe a little more to build, and the Rush Creek Wind Farm, which also cost about $1 billion to build. Now, Rush Creek Wind Farm, which is out east, is about, well, the nameplate capacity on it is 600 megawatts, right? So, and Comanche 3 is nameplate capacity of 850 megawatts. So that's the nameplate, 850 and 600. Those are the two nameplates. So keep that in mind. Now, they are going to be ramping down Comanche when it finally gets back online. And that's a whole other thing. You can't just ramp a coal plant up and down, and they all know it. And they claim that Comanche 3 is a dog. I'm sure it does have some technology or technological issues. But part of it is you can't run a coal plant. A coal plant is a draft horse. You can't think it's a thoroughbred and try and act like it's a thoroughbred and run it like it's a thoroughbred, because it's not a thoroughbred. It's a draft horse. So the capacity, so the current accredited capacity for Comanche, and this is what Xcel and they're predicting is roughly 50%. So that means 400 and somewhere for, let's say, 400 to 450 or 425 megawatts. So you're getting roughly half, and that is reliable power, right? That's power that it's the accredited power capacity. So Rush Creek, which is 600 megawatts, its accredited capacity is between 49 and 80 megawatts. So that's why you can't just go replace an 850 megawatt coal plant with a 600 megawatt wind farm and then expect you're going to make up the other 200 with demand side management, because you're really only getting on a good day 80 megawatts out of it. That's when it's that's its accredited capacity, 80 megawatts, roughly less than a tenth of the nameplate capacity of a coal plant. And both of them cost about $1 billion.
And I think that it speaks to exactly what Ethan found in this report and why the reserve margin declined so precipitously. Because as you pointed out, yes, there was a couple, I think, natural gas projects that were thrown in the planned mix, but by and large, it's all wind and solar, and I think one or two battery projects that are coming online. And that's why you see the reserve margin go from 6.9% to negative, I forget what, negative 17% or something frightening like that. As we're coming, did you have something?
I do to say also on the cost on this, we have to pay for the cost of retiring Comanche 1 and 2, and that is, or 2 and 3 together. That's it's almost $900 million. We have to pay for that, plus we have to pay to build or procure new sources of power to replace Comanche 2 and 3, which we could actually just keep open and run them properly and use them at least long enough to build out something like nuclear or something else. But we're double paying.
That's actually a great point. the fact that we're double paying for the capacity that we're forcing off the grid. We're paying to replace them with these projects that Ethan laid out in the report that we'll drop in the show notes. And then because of the shortfall, we're going to have to pay to go out into the spot market and try to pay for power at a premium, hoping that someone has some excess that they're willing to sell us, which is, can't always count on that. As we see with the request to delay Comanche 2, they were afraid of relying on the market to make up that gap and say, we better keep the coal plant on a little bit longer. But as we're coming up on time here, Ethan, I want to thank you for joining us and talking about your report. As I mentioned, I'll make sure to put it in the show notes so everyone gets a chance to look at the numbers that you found. But do you have any takeaways for our listeners on this one?
I have three. So one is we do have a reliability crisis. Ethan shows it in his paper, which you all will be able to see, and I encourage everybody to read it. It is an easy read, and he explains what these terms that we were talking about today, he explains them in the paper. You'll be able to understand them. It's an easy read, and it's pretty, the math doesn't work, and you'll see that as well. So we do have a reliability crisis, Aaron Overturf, just FYI. The second one is, I'm going to say Greg Sopkin was right. We are paying for bad decisions that were made decades ago, and it's baked into the costs now, and we're going to continue to pay for them into the future. This is not because of the repeal of wind and solar production or tax credits. This is because of bad policy from the state of Colorado. It's bad settlement agreements that impacted ratepayers, and you are going to pay for it. You probably didn't even see it in 2004, but you have started seeing it, and it's only going to get worse as we have to double pay for stranded assets like Comanche 2 and 3, and then pay to procure new sources of power or to build new sources of power. We're going to be paying for it. So your electricity rates are going to continue to skyrocket over the next couple of decades, I suspect. I predict. And I will say, and Jake was right, you're the first one that I know that said Comanche 2 is going to stay. You thought it was going to stay open. You're the first one that said it out loud. So I want to give you and Greg Sopkin were both right. And then the last thing is I'd get a generator and I wouldn't wait. I'd get it now.
Firm your own grid, as always. But that does it for us on another episode here of PowerGab. If folks like what you saw, you can head over to powergab.org to check out our entire back catalog. We produce new episodes every single week. We're also available wherever you get your audio shows, whether that's Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And if you'd like to reach out to us to suggest future show topics or guests you'd like to see us interview here on the show, you can send those our way at info@powergab.org. We always love hearing from you guys. But until next week, we'll see you.